And the children.
Welcome to Midnight. You just hear the beginning of a song called Bless the Beast and the Children. Today's program is dedicated to a topic that a lot of people run away and hide from. It's all over our society. And today we're going to talk very directly about it and meet some of the people who have done it. And I'm speaking of child abuse. We're going to be meeting in just a moment Christina Crawford, who is the first adopted child of Joan Crawford, who's written an autobiography in which we find out that the great superstar, Joan Crawford, star of screen, idol of millions, beat her children and was, in fact, a child-abusing mother. Also on today's program, we're going to meet a couple of young kids who have had very bad experiences with their parents. They've been beaten by them. We're going to meet members of an organization called Parents Anonymous, parents who admit to having had these uncontrollable urges to beat their children. And we're going to meet some professionals in the field, some judges and people who are dealing on the front lines of child abuse, which is a big problem in our society. And again, it's the thing you don't hear much about in your neighborhood. It's a thing you don't read much about in the paper, but it really is all over the place. Our first guest, Christina Crawford, actually is making quite a stir with her book. This is Joan Crawford's first adopted child. She adopted 4 children. Formerly, Christina Crawford was an actress herself. She's now in the promotion business and the author of this book. Just recently out, correct?
Yes.
It's an autobiography, a true story. It's called Mommie Dearest, and we are not mincing words here. Joan Crawford was, in fact, a child-abusing parent, correct?
That's right, yes.
Before we get into some of the specifics, can we maybe look at some pictures of you with your mother, or maybe a kind of a comfortable way to start out? We come up here on the monitor. Actually, we'll have to switch the monitor around so we can see it. First one is up there. This is you when you were how old?
Oh, just a few weeks when I was first adopted.
Why did Joan Crawford want to be a mother when she ended up being such a bad mother?
I don't think she anticipated being a bad mother. I think she wanted children desperately. She could not have them. And she went to an enormous amount of trouble to adopt them outside of the state of California, which did not permit single parents to adopt at that time.
Who were your fathers? And she was married a few times, right, during...
Well, yes, she was married briefly for just a few years to a man by the name of Philip Terry when I was quite young. The marriage.
Is this a birthday party for you?
Yes, that is.
Well, let's dwell on this. Was this obviously your mother probably had mood swings and changes. Was there any negative association with this party in your mind?
No, none, except that, you know, I was not terribly close friends with many of those children.
Anybody famous in this picture we should know about?
Well, it's a little hard for me to see.
Really? It looks like something from the Halloween show yesterday.
Maggie Sullivan, you can see there on the left. And most of the people in the picture were children from Hollywood families. By that I mean show business families. Not necessarily all performers, but directors, producers, studio heads, that sort of thing. That is a picture of me on, I believe, my 4th birthday. And in the book, this picture is also in the book, I said that this was rather definitive of my Hollywood princess phase as a child. I think you can see that is
sure, being the daughter of a Hollywood queen. With
the organdy and the satin ribbons in my hair and just the sort of general attitude that I had, that of a princess. This picture coming up now is in the living room, the formal living room. You can't see the top painting too well, but it's a painting that was one of my mother's favorites, actually, that was done about 10 years before this photograph was taken.
Did you enjoy that? In this photo we see mimicking your mother totally there. Yeah.
Exactly. I was trained to be a mirror image of my mother. We are dressed alike in mother and daughter outfits, which really look like children's clothes, don't they?
I was going to say that. I thought yet another Halloween costume was appearing on the program.
This is one of the last pictures that my mother and I had taken together. It was at a telethon, that charity telethon that we were doing, and we were having a good time. There were many beautiful years that we had together, and I loved my mother very much. There were also many years of tragedy.
All right, let's talk about some of those years of tragedy right now. In this book, Mommie Dearest, you talk about some things that may be very typical of child abuse cases.
Yes,
you talk about the fact that
that
your mother was an alcoholic.
Yes, she was, progressively more so as time went on and as I got older. But my mother is also, although she spoke about her own past very, very little, the stories were always very sketchy, and in fact they changed over a period of time. So that it was difficult to tell what was indeed reality and what was perhaps
from her own past.
Yes, what I was going to say is that according to those very sketchy stories, she is a self-reported abused child herself.
So this is something that in my previous interviews with child abused people, that there is a tendency that if you are beaten as a child, that you will then do the same thing as an adult. How do you feel about that, having been abused yourself? Do you have any children?
I have no children of my own. My husband's son, my stepson, lives with us. And I must say it's been one of the most wonderful experiences of my life. I have had a unique opportunity to help raise this fine young man.
You don't feel this pattern being imprinted on you then?
Well, you see, I do believe that we have choice in the matter, and although it's very unfortunate, if you grow up in a home where your only role modeling, where your only mirror of behavior is that of abuse or a violent temper, you tend to think that's the only way to deal with situations. However, I am quite honest in the book and also in public about the fact that at one point in my life, in my late 20s, I realized that I could make no more progress as a human being toward the kind of life I wanted to live, and I went into therapy for a number of years, 3 or 4 years.
Well, I'm not certain, but I would feel that having been in therapy in some way produced whatever kind of person was able to write a book to go all the way back to your childhood. Let's talk about some of the things that happened. For example, weird thing. I mean, this is the way child abuse starts, a crazy obsession that a parent has. In your case, Joan Crawford has this obsession with wire coat hangers. And tell us what happens as a result of that to little 5-year-old Christina, who was originally Joan Crawford Jr., which was your original first name.
That's correct. My name wasn't changed until about a year later when I was legally adopted. But as far as in the book I called them the night raids. They were, the best I can describe them as living nightmares. I would be sound asleep in my bed.
About how old were you?
Any time from, I would think maybe 5 on.
That's so young.
Yes, it is. I would be asleep, and something would have happened to my mother. I cannot tell you what it is because I was both too young and I was asleep to understand what it was that provoked or began these, whether it was a combination of alcohol, her own terror, I don't know, her loneliness or frustration, I don't know. But something would happen to her to set her off, and it was always in the middle of the night and I was always asleep. This particular night raid, as I called it, I had made a mistake. I had broken one of the rules, very rigid rules under which we lived, and that rule was that I was not to put any clothes on wire coat hangers. She had covered wooden hangers that we were supposed to put our clothes on, and I had not done that, in 1 or 2 instances, and she found, I think, 2 wire coat hangers in my entire closet, and she focused on that, she fixed on that, and she ripped the entire closet apart. She threw everything out of the closet, she threw everything out of the shelves.
This is the middle of the night?
In the middle of the night, pitch black, yes. And the only light is coming from inside the closet. It was a walk-in closet. And when she had finished with that, that actually was what woke me up. I heard strange noises, sounds. And she came out of the closet and yanked me out of bed by my hair and started spanking me and hitting me in the face, slapping me across the face. And it was very difficult for me to understand what had gone wrong, but I realized it had something to do with wire coat hangers. And she threw me on the floor, and then she ripped my bed apart. And when she had destroyed everything in my room, she simply said, "Clean up your mess," and left.
You know, I'm wondering, even as you sit here now, reprising this story, do you feel that you're getting even with your mother, that you're now hitting her back by being on television, talking about Joan Crawford, by writing a book
No.
that
You
shows
see,
this very sordid part of her private life?
no.
Why not,
If
though?
this
It is revenge, isn't it?
No, it is not revenge. If this book had been written out of revenge, it would not be the book it is. And I think when people are able to read the book, they will realize that there is an enormous compassion in this book. There is an enormous love for my mother, and that is actually what kept me going. I think if I hadn't loved my mother, and if there hadn't been good times between us, tender times, vulnerable times, close moments throughout our entire life, I probably would have either died in the process, killed myself, or certainly never lived to a fruitful adult.
What do you say to the people, like in yesterday's post, Eugenia Shepard's column, of people who say that your mother isn't here to defend herself anymore, right? And if you really loved your mother, why would you want millions of people to know about a side of her that she tried to keep secret for so long?
First of all, it was no secret in the Hollywood community that as children we were abused. We had many servants who tried to intervene on our behalf, and they were fired. There were numerous of her personal friends, her dates, I think even some of her husbands, who tried to intervene on our behalf and were told flat out that it was none of their business.
But the general public, though, that's what I'm referring to in terms of...
Her public image in terms of her profession, first of all, is preserved forever on film. That will never change. Nothing will ever touch that. And that was her real love. I mean, that was what she devoted her life to. So in that sense, it remains untouched. She has left a legacy that is extraordinary. And my book doesn't touch in any great extent on her professional career, only as it affected our private life. As far as the image that she had as a private person, her public image as a private person, it was largely fabricated, and the people, most of the people in Hollywood knew it was a fabrication. As far as doing this to my mother, that is just not the case. What I did was take the right to my own life for myself, and I wrote my autobiography with a great deal of pain and a great deal of soul-searching. And my story is unique, I suppose, in that it explodes the myth that these kinds of things don't happen among the rich and the wealthy.
That's what I started out by saying. This problem of child abuse is everywhere in our society. I'm running late. We had to take a break for commercial. We'll continue with Christina Crawford right after this. Now, 38, 39 years later, comes a book from Christina Crawford. It's called A True Story, Mommie Dearest, an autobiography about herself, her life in the early stages with her mother, Joan Crawford. And it's probably going to be one of the most talked about autobiographies, I would suspect, of the year. Other odd things that are, whatever, indelibly impressed on your subconscious, I would imagine. Having to wear the same dress to school for a month.
4 months.
For 4 months, excuse me. What led to that?
Again, another, what my mother saw as disobeying the very rigid and strict rules under which we lived, only this time I was in a boarding school, and it was very cold one morning, and I wore my coat to class. And for some reason that angered her, because she felt I should take a sweater.
How did she know, though, if you're at a boarding school?
Well, she was told by the people that at the school. And not in terms of having it reported to her, but in the course of conversation with the headmistress it came out. And she became very enraged about that, so she told me that I could wear just my coat to school, meaning just my coat over my underwear. Well, of course, the people at the school wouldn't let me do that. So my mother had somebody come to the school while I was in class the next day, and they took all my clothes, all of them, everything. And so I had only the dress that I had on, and they left me one dress.
How old were you then, Christine?
I was, I would think 12.
And odd things happened to you with regard to food. If you didn't finish your food at one meal, then what happened?
Well, what happened was that I really only had one thing I disliked enormously, and that was very, very rare meat. And we had half an hour in which to eat our meals. And
at home, this is not at the boarding school.
This is at home. And if I didn't finish my food within that allotted half hour, the plate was taken to the refrigerator and left there until the next meal. And it was brought back, and if I didn't eat it then, it was taken to the refrigerator and left there until the next meal. And that went on for 4 days once. and it had turned green. I mean, it was absolutely revolting and disgusting. I tried to eat it once and I threw up, but that was it. I just didn't get any other food.
How did your mother physically abuse you? Did she hit you with her fists? Did she hit you with...
No, she never hit me with my... she never hit
Did she
me
hit
with
you
her
with
fist.
any objects?
Several times, yes.
What objects?
Whatever was at hand. Hairbrush, hangers, household objects. There's one scene in the book which is quite in quite graphic detail. A large can of cleanser which exploded eventually and went all over the room, and I had to spend the rest of the night cleaning it up. The punishments were very, very long. It isn't that any one of them, with few exceptions, when I was beaten pretty badly, in and of themselves were so hideous, but they had very long duration to them. And she didn't seem to forget. I mean, the punishment was way beyond anything that originally had happened.
At one point, she almost killed you, correct, when she was strangling you that time?
Yes, I believe she did. Yes.
What led to that?
A very long series of events over a period of an entire evening where she was very upset, and it was at a time in her life when things were going very badly for her, and her drinking was very serious, which was the one thing I think that the Hollywood community did not recognize, that she had such a serious drinking problem for so many years, because like some alcoholics, she was able to contain it in a certain way, but that came out of some deep hidden anger where we had a direct confrontation. And
how old were you at the time?
I was 13.
13 years old.
Yes.
Which can be a tough age for a mother and daughter anyway.
Very difficult, very difficult. The teenage years, and you know, I think it's perhaps simplistic to say that the hardest thing in the world is to be a parent. I mean, there is no doubt about it. It's very difficult, particularly if you're a single parent and trying to combine it with a career that is so demanding. But at that particular time in her life, her career was in very poor shape, and her alcoholism had increased considerably, and all those things combined seemed to make it impossible for her to control her own inner rage, and I, in most cases, was the object of the venting.
And in this particular case, she was literally strangling you, but then another person in the room prevailed to stop you.
Exactly. And then the juvenile authorities were called by my mother, but they were unable to help me.
Your mother?
By my mother, yes.
Called the juvenile authorities?
Yes.
Because she was aware of her problem?
No. She wanted me declared an incorrigible.
For what reasons?
That is, the reason was that she said she couldn't handle me anymore. I mean, you have to understand this happened all in one...
It's going around in circles.
Yes, so...
Did she beat the other children? You were the first of 4 children, and
yes.
we know it's difficult usually for the first child.
My brother.
Chris.
Yes.
And both you and Chris were left out of your mother's will. That's correct?
That's correct.
Do you feel a sense of obvious... no, I'm going to say obviously, but do you feel a sense of, again, revenge at being left out of the will? Now you're going to at least get some money from all these years of horror. I'm going to write this book. I'm going to get money. Sure, she left me out of the will, but look, this is what I'm doing. Because people feel this way about
I know
it.
people feel that way, but I don't think they understand either.
Well, what don't
relation.
they understand?
Well, first of all, I think, you know, if you read the book, you know that I did everything in my power to show my mother that I loved her, that I cared about her, and that I wanted to help her. We had, in the later years of my adult life, a very close relationship. I was shocked by the will. I had not expected.
Well, you hadn't really spoken to your mother, though, for what,
No,
almost the
that's
last
true.
3 years of her life.
That's quite true, but...
Maybe that's the period when you were left out of the will.
Well, I don't think so, but the will is being contested in the state of New York, and unfortunately I'm just not at liberty to discuss the details
That's
of that.
okay. I don't know anything about the case, but I'm curious if you say at one point, right, you had a very close and loving relationship with your mother.
At many points.
At many points. In later years.
Even in the early years.
Well, what I wanted to ask was, if you didn't speak to her for the last 3 years of her life, wouldn't that be kind of... Isn't that a clue that it couldn't have been that great a relationship where you would have spoken to her for the last 3 years?
In terms of the overall pattern of the relationship, I think so many unusual, unpredictable things happened, that the way I viewed it was that my mother and I were in constant communication. We wrote each other. She knew about all the changes in my life. I had left the acting profession. I had gone back to school. I had gotten a master's degree. I had gotten another job. I had gotten married. And at each step of the way, she knew my progress. She wrote me her congratulations. And the way I felt was that we had come to, she was living in New York, by the way. I was living in California, some 3,000 miles between us, and I felt that we had come to a rather peaceful resolution of it. If it wasn't other people's concept of an ideal relationship, so be it. Our life had not been other people's concept of an ideal relationship, and I accepted that.
I want to take a break, and we'll continue with Christina Crawford after this.